Q&A session. If your question is not answered during the Q&A session, Audrey will reach out to you via email following the webinar. In order to enter your questions into the queue, click on the questions in the section panel of the webinar and type your question into the text box and press enter. It is now my pleasure to introduce today's presenter, Ms. Audrey Frist. Audrey. Audrey is a Senior Project Manager for Dietary Supplements at the Eurofins Nutrition Analysis Center in Des Moines, Iowa. Before coming to Eurofins, Ms. Frist worked as a laboratory manager in academic research for 20 years. Ms. Frist has a Bachelor's of Science in Microbiology from Mississippi State University and has done postgraduate molecular cellular biology work at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. Audrey, the floor is all yours.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I want to thank you all for joining me here today. As Chloe mentioned, I'm the Senior Project Manager specializing in dietary supplements here at Eurofins Nutrition Analysis Center. So this morning, I plan to discuss with you specifics regarding supplement facts panels, as well as go through the new FDA regulations that have recently been enacted. Hopefully, we will cover all the information you need, but if not, as she mentioned, you can submit questions online, and I'll be happy to address as many of those as I can at the end of the presentation. You may also feel free to email me with future questions. So in my role here at Eurofins, I would say the most common questions that I'm asked by clients are in regards to the differences between nutrition and supplement facts panels and which type of panel a client needs for their product. To be able to answer the second question, we need to address the first. So first, let's take a moment to look at the similarities. Per the FDA, inclusion of the same nutrients is required, regardless if you have a food or a supplement. You may commonly hear these referred to as B2 ingredients. And for those of you who are curious about where that gets its name, it's simply the location in the subsection of the Code of Federal Regulations where the information is found. But this information is required, and it is required to be in a specific order on your facts panel. Please note that, let's see. Please note, okay, I'm going to show you here for current, these are the current, sorry. Please note that the nutrients I'm showing here are for the currently compliant label. These are not for the new FDA guidelines, which I'll discuss shortly. We'll revisit those in the future slides. As you see here, there's different items required. You have calories from fat, different types of fat like total, saturated, trans fats, cholesterol. You also have a couple of proximates, such as your protein and your carbohydrates. You have sugars, fibers, a couple of vitamins, and a few minerals. That's pretty much where all the similarities end. These are mandatory on a nutrition facts panel, no matter what their daily value or their quantity is. So, for example, on a nutrition facts panel, you will see here that cholesterol is 0 milligrams and a 0% daily value, but it's still present and required to be on a label. However, only nutrients that are considered to be significant or present in what they call a measurable amount are included on a supplement panel. Which, if you think about it, that makes sense because these nutrients are meant to supplement your normal diet. So if they're below a certain level, it's not really considered to be a supplement. If it is an insignificant amount, it's actually considered by the FDA to be 0 and is not allowed to be on the facts panel at all. This measurable amount varies by the nutrient, but it's generally considered to be approximately 2% of a daily value. So if we use the same example on the previous slide of 0 milligrams of cholesterol, you will notice that nutrient is not shown on the supplement label. In fact, a lot of information is missing. Proteins are missing, as well as some of the fat information. The most significant difference is in the information that is allowed for each type of panel. Nutrition labels are limited to the previously listed mandatory nutrients, as well as some voluntary vitamins and minerals, which are shown here in the order that they would be present on a nutrient facts panel. Excuse me. You may also want to add, vitamin D, vitamin E. You can add B vitamins, and you can add just a handful of other minerals, such as magnesium, zinc, or iodine. But this is the extent of the information that the FDA will permit or allow to be on a nutrition facts panel. However, there's really not much of a limit to the nutrients that are allowed for supplementation. For example, you can have a greater variety of minerals. You can have ones such as manganese, you can have selenium, you can have fluoride, and many others. You can also include fatty acid information, such as EPA, DHA. You can include omega-3s, omega-6s, astaxanthins. Some of these nutrients are especially important for those of you with fish oil supplements. Amino acids may also be listed on a supplement facts panel. These are generally free amino acids that are used to fortify your product, such as L-glutamine or possibly branched chain amino acids. I refer to the next category as active ingredients. This includes, as you can imagine, a rather long list of possibilities. You can have items such as coenzyme Q10, you can have collagen, you can have polyphenols, you can have resveratrol, pretty much just any active ingredient that you would like to list that's in your product. You may also list botanicals, so you have ginkgo or you have echinacea. That's allowed, as well as proprietary blends. And on a label, you will see that most of these items have an asterisk or other notation to the side that indicates that there is no daily value established for that particular nutrient, which is not unexpected. One other note, if you're making any type of label claim, that becomes a mandatory nutrient as well. So let's say you want to claim that your product is high in vitamin E, then you are going to need to test for and include vitamin E in your facts panel. So to go a little more in depth on some of these, the source of vitamins and minerals may be listed in parentheses next to the nutrient. Next to the nutrient. For example, vitamin B12 is listed as cyanocobalamin and potassium as potassium chloride. You can also use multiple sources for one nutrient with, in the respective contribution. So, for example, let's say you have 30% cyanocobalamin, but 70% methylcobalamin for your B12. If that's the breakdown for your product, you can put both of those in parentheses. If you do not show this information on the panel next to the nutrient, it must be shown in the ingredient statement itself. This may pertain more if your nutrient is naturally found within an ingredient instead of it actually being the ingredient itself. So say, for example, your source of iron may be from spinach. So you would have spinach listed in your ingredient statement and not in parentheses next to iron on the panel. When listing a botanical, there are only two requirements that you really need to keep in mind. You must list both the Latin name of the plant as well as the part of the plant that it's derived from. In an example shown here, you will notice that the grapeseed extract is shown to be from the seeds of Vitis vinifera. followed by the amount of the botanical in that serving, which is 100 milligrams, followed by the cross notation indicating that it does not have a daily value. I also want to point out that we cannot really test botanicals as far as being able to quantitate them. Most of the botanicals that we do here are for identification purposes only. The exception might be if there's an active ingredient in a botanical that you would like to test for. As for proprietary blends, the same guidelines apply here in regards to the order as they would in an ingredient list. So in other words, you're going to list the most abundant by weight first, and that's going to be followed in order, followed by the remainder in decreasing order of weight. The total amount is listed by the blend name, and you can name it anything you want. They even say you can give it some sort of fanciful name, but you are not required to list the quantities of each individual component within your proprietary blend. Many clients choose to use this instead of listing items individually because it helps protect their recipes. You may by now have decided which type of panel works best for your product. If not, I often advise clients to ask themselves this: how do you plan to market your product? Do you plan to market as a supplement, or do you plan to try and market it as a food product? If you have many nutrients that are not allowed on a nutrition facts panel that make your product unique, then you may want to opt for the supplement panel. But please keep in mind that your product must then be labeled on the front as a dietary supplement. And this decision will also impact where in the area of the store that your product can be shelved. So this is going to bring us to the next topic I'd like to discuss, which covers the recent changes made by the FDA. This is the greatest change made to labeling in the past 20 to 25 years, and it was done primarily to better educate the consumer and to make facts panels easier to read and to understand by the general public. Please note that these changes apply to both nutrition and supplement facts panels equally, just as in previous versions. Now, while these changes I'm about to describe have already been implemented as of July of this year, they are not yet mandatory. If your company has 10 million or more in annual sales, then you have 2 years to become compliant with the new label guidelines and regulations, whereas smaller companies do not have to be compliant until 2019. Now, remembering back to a few slides ago when I was showing you what is currently compliant and showing you the list of B2 ingredients. Per the new regulations, vitamins A and C are no longer required. This is primarily because they have found that there are very few deficiencies in these vitamins. Taking their place are going to be both vitamin D and potassium. These are nutrients that some people in the population are not getting enough of and putting them at risk for chronic disease. So they believe that this is more important and now needs to be included on the label. Keep in mind, though, that vitamin A and C is now becoming a voluntary nutrient. So they've gone from mandatory to voluntary. I also want to mention that calories from fat is no longer even permitted. It cannot be considered a voluntary nutrient. Calories from fat They believe the type of fat is more important than the amount of fat. So they have removed this from the labels. These aren't the only changes that have been made. Most notably is the addition of the added sugars and some changes regarding dietary fiber. And I'm going to discuss those two a little more in detail in just a moment. The FDA is also moving away from using international units as a unit of measure. They don't believe that the general population really has an understanding or grasp as to what international units are. So they're going towards milligrams or micrograms, depending on the vitamin. So vitamin D, for example, is moving from international units to micrograms. Folic acid is also micrograms, but it's in a microgram DFE now, which stands for dietary fiber, or which stands for folic equivalents. There are some other changes which aren't as prominent, that aren't going to affect the label quite so much. Some of the daily values for some of the minerals and some of the vitamins have changed. They've also implemented being able to use dual labels, so you can show both per serving amounts and daily values as well as per package, because I think they do realize that sometimes people indulge themselves a little bit and will eat an entire package of something instead of just one serving. For the added sugars, this is one that's had quite difficult for our industry, at least. This is information that the client must provide to us if we're going to make you a label. The reason being is that our sugar profiles are performed by HPLC, and HPLC is not able to differentiate if the sugar is naturally occurring or if it has been added to the product. And added sugars don't include just white sugar or brown sugar. It also includes other sugar sources, such as honey counts, molasses, syrups, corn syrup, even a concentrated fruit juice if it's not being used specifically to make a juice product. Those are all considered to be sources of sugar. And as for dietary fiber, there are a few new guidelines outlining which fiber is considered to be beneficial or not beneficial. This list right now is expected to grow. There's only 8 fibers currently listing, but they are expecting that there will be up to approximately 25. So if a fiber is considered to be not beneficial according to the FDA, please note that this is not considered part of dietary fiber, and it needs to be subtracted out from your total. It is, however, still considered to be a carbohydrate. So it will be subtracted from the fiber, but will still be included as a carbohydrate on your labels. As far as the current list that's concerned, the only insoluble fiber that's considered non-beneficial is inulin. And the ones that right now they're considering beneficial are beta-glucan soluble fibers, psyllium husks, cellulose, guar gum, pectin, locust bean gum, and hydroxypropylmethcellulose. Now, depending upon the type of fiber that you have in your product, you may prefer to have your dietary fiber analyzed by HPLC instead of our crude total dietary fiber analysis. The HPLC method will actually break down your fiber into soluble and insoluble, and it will further break down the soluble into low and high molecular weight fractions. This is important primarily if you've added some low molecular weight soluble dietary fiber to your product. Reason being is that that fraction is actually washed out of the fiber in our normal protocol. So if that's in your product and you do not do the more detailed HPLC package, then your fiber totals aren't going to be quite right, aren't going to be accurate. So Eurofins can help you navigate these changes in several ways. First of all, we want to let you know that we have generated several packages, nutritional packages, for both the current and the newly compliant FDA requirements. And we are aware that there's quite a few tests involved with each of these packages, so we have heavily discounted them over the cost of what it would be for each individual test. And the current packages will actually be available until the mandatory compliance date, at which time those will be discontinued. We also can provide these packages with a few customizations to include fatty acid profile or to include the more complete dietary fiber analysis. I also want to emphasize that we do generate fax panels here at Eurofins using ESHA's Genesis program. And we can either generate the panel using a COA from a product that we've tested for you, from a specific sample or lot, or we can also use a COA provided from your manufacturer. We're also able to generate dual labels as well as bilingual ones. When a client requests one of our new FDA compliant packages, we do ask that you complete a questionnaire, and I know several of you have already encountered this and had questions about it, so I want to take a few minutes to go over specifics and discuss this with you. We realize that this is not the most convenient for you, but we ask that you do this so we can guide you in selecting the most appropriate analysis for your product. Also, the FDA is stressing record keeping more than ever for this newer format. So we're hoping that the questionnaire can also be beneficial in this respect. We need several pieces of information. Obviously, serving size information. This would include, say, if your product is 500 milligrams, we also need to know what the standard household measurement equivalent is. So if that's 1 tablet or 3 capsules per serving. And we also need to know how many servings per container you have. The next question on our questionnaire actually asks if you have added oligosaccharides to your product. This is actually going back to the previous slide when we were discussing dietary fiber. This will help us if you answer yes. That means we would like to advise you to use the more detailed dietary fiber analysis. We also ask if you have added dietary fiber, which kinds you've added, so that we know whether or not those need to be subtracted from your fibers. And we also ask if you've added sugar. Again, going back to the previous slides, where we would know that we need to include that on your label as well. Please note that our questionnaire will hopefully be available online by the end of the month. Once completed online, it will go directly to our client service inbox to be addressed. And then the client service representative can get back to you. If you ever have any questions about the questionnaire or any issues, feel free to contact us and ask. Any of us will be glad to help guide you through it. So lastly, there are a few other tests that you may want to take into consideration for the new FACS panel. We've already discussed the dietary fiber choices, so I won't revisit that. But for vitamin E now reports as milligrams alpha-tocopherol. So if you are expecting vitamin E in your product, you will probably need to have us test for the tocopherol profile so that we can break them down into the different fractions. If you've added niacin to your supplement, we'll also need to perform analysis for tryptophan. Actually, the body is able to convert tryptophan into niacin. So if you have, so to be able to give you an accurate niacin quantity, 60 milligrams of tryptophan actually equal 1 milligram of niacin. So we would take those two values and add those together to get your total niacin for your panel. Lastly, you may want to take into account sugar alcohols, such as mannitol or sorbitol. You may want to have a sugar alcohol profile performed, as our HPLC will also recognize these as sugars. So to be able to have an accurate sugar quantity, those would need to be subtracted from your total sugars. So I guess at this time I'll take any questions you may have. Do you know if there are any, Chloe?
Yes, we do have one question asking, can you please repeat which fibers are considered beneficial?
Sure, not a problem. Okay, the list of beneficial fibers. There's only 7 of those at the moment. It's beta-glucan soluble fiber, psyllium husk, cellulose, guar gum, pectin, locust bean gum, and hydroxypropyl methcellulose. I was hoping I wouldn't have to say that one twice.
And then can you go over the regulation you were citing for the supplement needed at all? Here, I'll show you.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. What regulation for supplement needs all of the nutritional info?
Oh, okay. If I'm understanding your question correctly, as far as where you can find information specifically regarding dietary supplement regulations, it is 21 CFR 101.36. And if you go onto the FDA website and type that in, then it should send you to that information. You can find really all the information there that you need. It can be quite cumbersome to try and pour through, but it'll give you the order of nutrients that need to be on the panels, as well as what's mandatory and what's allowed.
And then lastly, I've already had my product tested following the old FDA guidelines. Do I need to completely retest following the new regulation?
The answer to that should be no. If you've had the product tested and you still have that lot number that you've tested, you only really need to go back and test for the vitamin D and potassium. And then that you should be able to then put that on the panel and have a new one generated.
Perfect. And if we did not get to your question, Audrey will send you an email personally to discuss your question. And that wraps up today's webinar, and we'd like to thank Audrey for her time and her very informative presentation, and thank you to all of you for joining us. Have a great day.